stand here with great humility as the youngest grandchild of Saba Willi, knowing fully well that no words can truly portray, represent the greatness of Saba. Yeah, I'm truly honored to be representing all my brothers in offering Divrei Hesped. Saba was nifter on Purim. On Purim, Esther went into Achashverosh and she made a tefillah to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So Keli Lama Azavtani. I heard a pshat al Pia Medrash that Esther was davening for two schusim for Klal Yisrael to be saved. The schus of Yisrael and the schus of Michal. Yisrael, which is acronym for the Avos, Yaakov, Yitzchak, Rachel, Leah, Sarah, Abraham, represents the schus Avos that our forefathers should be making for us. Saba, to us and to me, is the portrayal of this schus. Saba escaped the Nazis in Machshemam, came from old Europe, and brought to us the Messiah to continue for us with many minhagim and ma'asim tovim. Just 1 week ago, I was in the apartment with Saba. I was looking through the book that they have for the 90th birthday, and I saw an article of Achnasa Sefer Torah headed by Saba in the community. This was Saba. He brought through our Messiah, brought us the tradition from everything that we lost in the Holocaust. And it's for that reason that which many future generations will come. The second schus is Michal. This represents Malach Michal, which is our defendant in Shemayim against Amalek. Michal is the gematria 101. The Gemara says, it's not the same as learning 100 times, learning 101 times. Amalek is Amal Kuf. They only go 100. Klal Yisrael always goes one more. They always push through and persevere. Saba left from Europe with nothing. No family, no brothers, no sisters, no parents. And he never stopped. He always persevered. Always one more, always one more. After losing everything, he never gave up. Saba lived a life of pain and never showed it. No one would have ever known that Saba was left without any family members. No one after the war. Saba was full of jokes. He didn't show anyone his tsar. We were told a story from Safta that I actually did not know the story of Michal. My brother told me this today. That when Saba went to Auschwitz to see the place where his family had perished, he couldn't get the words of Kaddish out. He carried all this tsar, all the pain. He never showed it to anyone. You would have asked anyone, they would have said they had no clue. He still carried on. This was who Saba was. We were zeicha to have Saba with us in Lawrence multiple times. One of them was for a few months. And even though I was too young to fully remember, my brothers tell me how Saba was always looking to teach us lessons, ingrain of us virtues. He used to play with us chess, even when we wanted to go outside and play. He was teaching us patience, but he never let us win. If you didn't win, you didn't win. You lose. There was no fake love. There was no that you tried and no, you have to succeed in life. There's no getting around it. This was a lesson that we learned from Saba, along with many more. As my father will mention, Shem, from Rabbi Aaron Leib Steinman, he said, he was asked, what's the reason that we're zeichet in our dar to such arichas yamin? We find so many people different than all of us before living with great arichas yamin. And he answered that this galus is the galus of Edom, the galus of Esau. Esau's chus was kibbut avim. That was his mitzvah. In this galus, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is giving us the chance to go keneged and do the mitzvah of kibbut avim b'shleimus. Definitely one of the reasons why Saba was zeichet is such a arichas yamin was for this reason. I could account firsthand to Year's nefesh, my mother, my father, and all her siblings flying in monthly to come to take care of Saba and Savta together for over 10 years. giving up their own lives for the schus of this mitzvah. It's pashut that he was zeicha to live for so long for this reason. Whenever you come to the apartment, you see Dad Rochelle and Dad Eugene taking care of every need, every doctor. And Sally won't have this schus anymore. So you have to take care of what's in Shemayim instead. Just want to read a few words that my brother Yitzchak wrote. Sabo is a true rock and patriarch for the entire family. A true Yaki down to his bones. He was left all alone escaping from the war, and he by himself, with unimaginable strength and emunah, pushed through and built such a beautiful family together with Safta. We had such an unbelievable schus as grandchildren in the last 15 years to be able to just drop by at any time when we were living in Eretz Yisrael. Baruch Hashem, we took advantage. Always a smile on his face. Waited to enjoy nachas and hear about how his grandchildren and great-grandchildren are doing. Who can forget the never-ending devotion of all four children who truly gave Saba and Safta quality of life in the past few years, and allow all the next generation to bask in the glory of these amazing people and hear their stories and enjoy their presence. We'll be forever grateful to what they have done. We'll make them carry on his legacy, whichever you do, you must do it to its fullest. There's no such thing as half-baked. And that's how someone could be doing sit-ups well into his 90s. It means unlimited devotion to what you hold dear, and we will apply and all other ideas he stood for into our lives and carry on his name into the next generation. He's a Zecher. Everyone knows whenever you see Saba and Safta together, they'll be holding hands, sitting on the couch. They're now holding heads together in Shemayim, looking down at us. And they should continue to be Melech Yosher for us and the family and of all Klal Yisrael. How to be a skilled here in Menu. Willi Netzach Lavas, Mach Hashem Kendim Mal Kabanim.
For those of you who don't know me, I'm Diane Lichtenstein, the former head of the Federation sitting on the Bezdin. I worked together with Willi for almost 20 years on a daily basis. He was in charge of the kashrus, the financial and administrative parts. I was in charge of the religious parts. There are two stories I want to tell over, personal stories that I had with Willi, and they will show what kind of great man he was. The first was a story that there had been some problems in the Federation, and he had a lot of aggravation from it. And I sat down with him to discuss it, and I asked him, Willi, I said, what do you need this for? You're not paid for this. You do this l'shem mitzvah, but it's such aggravation. How can you, why do you stand with it? He says, Diane Lichtenstein, I want to tell you something. The last picture I have of my father, Zechron Lebracha, was of him standing up late at night, doing the accounts of the Chevra Kadisha. That's the image I have of my father, and I want to go on my father's path, in his derech. Think about it. He just remembered this, and this stayed in his mind. The image of his father was in his mind. But it fit in with what he was. He was a oisik b'tzarchei tzibur be'emuna. And I stress that word be'emuna because he was a man of the utmost integrity, which relates to the second story I want to tell you. We had Hechsher, Elal was under our Hechsher in those years. And a kashrus fashla, as they say here in Ivrit, happened. Some little tubs of margarine were switched by accident, and some butter was there. And they found that the mashgiach checked the first couple, found it was okay, and they let it through. They discovered this in the middle of the flight before they had given the meals out, and they took care of it. When they landed, they spoke to us about what happened. We immediately took responsibility and make sure that nothing would go wrong. But as luck would have it, a reporter from the Jewish Chronicle was on that flight. I don't have to tell you more what about the Jewish Chronicle and their attitude to religious Jews and kashrus in general. But the next week, it came out in the Jewish Chronicle, and everybody laughed at it, with the exception of one person, Willi. Willi said, "This is a public relations disaster, and we have to do something about it to counter it." And the discussion went on and on and on. And then he called me up that night. He said, "Diane Lichtenstein, I'm resigning from my post as head of the Kashrus Federation Synagogue." I said, "Why?" He says, "I can't bear the responsibility of what happened." So I said, "It's not your fault. It's a natural thing. Mashgiach checked. There was a switch." No, so my honesty does not allow me to stay. I said, "Willi, you're not going. I'm going to make sure you don't go." And I did. He didn't go. But I was thinking over that story. His ehrlichkeit, his honesty, that it felt that it wasn't right for him to continue. Believe me, 999 people out of 1,000 wouldn't have that kind of feeling. But that's because he felt the upsetness of by accident serving something not kosher, and it's on his watch. He has to resign. That's how he felt. In the end, Baruch Hashem, I got him not to resign, and he stayed on. And the reason I was so worried about him leaving was because many things he brought to the Confederation. He put the kashrus in order, and not only in order, they actually expanded quite a bit in those days. But one thing that he gave, which was absent in Anglo Jewry, respect for Rabbanim. He worked with Diane Brazina. He worked with Rabbi Telzner. He worked with Rabbi Hamer. He worked with a number of Rabbanim, and each one of them could testify about the derech eretz that he not only showed the Rabbanim, but also the derech eretz to teach to people, to others. And whenever there was a religious issue that came up, the one person we could rely on 100% was Willi. And in my opinion, he has nothing to worry about coming in front of the Kitzei HaKavod. He's got enough affidavits to support it. The family has been, of course, wonderful to him. His old age was, he had various machlas, but he was of sound mind. I spoke to him on the phone not that long ago. I think he was a bit hard of hearing, and Simone Zikna was on him. But himself, he was still fresh, and he still so concerned about the derech eretz and things like that. We're gonna miss him. He was a model balabos, both in his ehrlichkeit and his capabilities, and in terms of his Yiddishkeit. You could always rely on him to take the frum angle. The children and grandchildren have what to be proud of. Their Saba, their Abba, was an exceptional man, and he goes in front of the Kitzei HaKavod, take along with you all the affidavits of what you did for kashrus, all the mitzvahs, all the derech eretz you showed the Rabbanim, and how you encouraged others. And you not only encouraged, you stood firm whenever there was an issue. And believe me, there were plenty of issues. You could rely on Willi to lead the frum line.
Bershus Rabbanim Isim Kola Kola Kodesh Hazeh. We are here this evening to pay the kavod achron to our beloved dad, our Sabo Willi, and our Sabo Rabba. It was 1 year ago that our family was here in Yerushalayim, Ir HaKodesh, for Purim. And on Shushan Purim, while celebrating the Mishta V'Simcha, we heard the Besura Ra of the Sar HaTorah, Hagoyim Rav Chaim Kanievsky, Zecher Tzadik V'Kodesh L'Bracha, was nifter. And with that, a great darkness and mourning came onto the world, and specifically in Eretz Yisrael and Yerushalayim Ir HaKodesh. Mishenichnas Adar Marbim B'Simcha. However, yesterday, during our times of Mishta and Simcha, where the Megillah says, we went from Me'evel Le'yontiv and Me'afela La'oira. We were thrust into a darkness with the loss of our dear Reb Shlomo ben Reb Yehuda, Zecher Tzaddik L'Bracha. V'nahapachu, generally on the day meant Simcha. For us, it turned into a day of avelos and sadness. However, it's no coincidence that you, Dad, were nifter on Purim. For your life story is one that shared many similar characteristics. For less than a century ago, we experienced, or you experienced, a Haman who declared to the world, Yeshnoi am echad mefuzar mefoyrad mibei kol ha'amim. And there was a gzeira lahashmid lahareg ula'abed as kol ha'yehudim. Minar v'ad zoking taf v'noshim. No discrimination. Furthermore, Esther Hamalka tells all of Klal Yisrael, Lech kenois es kol ha-Yehudim, vitzumu alai v'al toichlu v'al tishtu. You were thrust into that situation when you went to camp, to the concentration, to the labor camps, not on your own volition. It was a kenois es kol ha-Yehudim, all of you together. And it wasn't a tzumu alai for shloishes yamim. It was a tzumu alai for several years where you did not know day in, day out, where your food would come from, where your survival would come from. And yet, out of that came a gadol, our sar, our rosh hamishpacha, our patriarch. And today we lost that connection to a person who lived a life with such tmimus, with an emunah pshuta, and great mesiras nefesh and personal sacrifice. When the Klausenberger Rebbe, after the war, gathered together with the She'eris HaPleita, their self-worth was in question. Why were they meant to survive? They felt helpless. They felt useless. They felt like they had nothing, no families, nothing to live for, but yet HaKadosh Baruch Hu spared their lives. Why? Said the Klausenberger Rebbe that in Parshas Bechukoisai, where we go through all the techachos, all the klolos that comes upon Klal Yisrael when Chas Shalom, there is a time where Klal Yisrael is not in a situation where they have to get this teichacha. The Klausenberger Rebbe said, you all experienced this teichacha. You all went through it. What's the next parsha after the teichacha? After the teichacha, the parsha is Parshas Erchin. Erchin discusses the value of an individual, how much an individual is worth. Klausenberger Rebbe said that someone that could come through those teichachos and now rebuild a life, rebuild a family, rebuild Klal Yisrael, that's the Erchin that the Torah is talking about. That's the value. That's the individual that Rebbeinu Shalom spared, because he knew that that would be the people who would be able to come and bring the continuation of the next generations. And so you, Dad, your Erchin is priceless. There's no value that we can put on such a person to go through such a Gehenna and come out with an unwavering emunah. Like Judge Eugene said, Es hakeves echod tasev aboiker, ve'es hakeves hasheni tasev ben aboyim. Ben Pazi says in the Medrash, and the halakha is like him. What's the pshat? Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem echad, kabos ol malach shemayim, v'ahavta l'reacha kamoicha. Two psukim, two parshios that certainly encapsulate kol HaTorah kula, but yet Ben Pazi es hakeves echad tasev aboiker becomes the banner of how Klal Yisrael has to conduct themselves in Avodas Hashem. And that was you, Dad. It did not make a difference what day it was of the week, what your mood was, whether it was besimcha, whether you were ba'atzvos, it was always bitmimos es hakeves echod tasev aboiker ves hakeves hasheni tasev ben aboyim. I'm here for a reason, and I'm here to do Ratzon Hashem, and whatever God wants from me at that moment, at that time, is what I am going to do. And you lived your life like that, and your children were able to observe that, and Baruch Hashem, your grandchildren were able to observe that, and your great-grandchildren were also able to observe that. And like my dear son said, that in this dar, in this generation, our avodah is kibbud av v'aim. You were zeicha ta'arichas yamim v'shonim because we are in the ikvus of the Mashiach. We're at the time where the geula is right around the corner. It's here. It's waiting for us. And Meirav Rabbaisai, I challenge you to find 4 children that could be mekayim the mitzvah of kibbud av v'aim in such an oifen like they did. Such dedication, such devotion, with kavod, with integrity, financially, emotionally, physically, every aspect of their being and their mitzias. Kol Eivarim was involved in the mitzvah of kibbud av. So Dad, now you go up to the Kisei HaKavod and you have a VIP ticket. Your entrance, they're waiting for you in glory. There's a red carpet waiting to be Mekabel, such a neshama. And by your side will be our dear mom, who's been waiting for you to be hand in hand together in the Olam HaEmes, where there's only truth, there's only simcha, there's no sadness. And so we ask for both of you to beseech the Rebbeinu Shalom on behalf of us and your family, that it's dai l'tzaraseinu. It's time for all the tzaras to end. Bein begashmius, bein beruchnius. You have the koyach to make that impression and to help and to bring that geula. And just like you blew the shofar for 40 years, those blows that went to the rikiyos and broke through all the spiritual planes, you now go and take all your schusim, your tekiyos, and come and have the time where we can be reunited of a Yahaya Bayoimahu, Yitoka B'Shofar Gadol, where we can all stand together, reunited, B'Simcha, at Tchiyas HaMesim, B'Mashiach Tzidkenu, B'Mheira V'Yomeinu, Amen V'Amen.
I want to thank everybody for coming here. On behalf of my siblings, every one of you is precious to us. Every one of you that came here tonight had a kesher with my father. Every one of you was precious to him. And right now he'd be saying to me, Julian, enough. Tircha de Tzibura, that was his thing. Don't do this. It's Tircha de Tzibura. You shouldn't say anything more. But what can I do? What can I do? Vayihi kol hashofar holech v'chozek ma'od. Moshe yedaber v'Elohim ya'anenu b'kol. My father was the shofar that kept on blowing. In times of grief and anger, we turn to our text of comfort for relief from the anguish and unbearable pain. Despite years of anticipatory grief, never knowing whether this might be the last time as I got on that plane going back, the fact of the end of his life, makes it no less painful. Grief is grief, however much the anticipation of it. Dad kept surprising us all, bouncing back from this or that setback. He surprised us because he was a Prussian man, a disciplined man, a man of routine and moderation, and undeterred by anything around him. I never saw him drunk. He always left something on his plate. He always rose early. In the British winters, when there was no central heating in my room, all he had to do was uncover the sheet from my left big toe for Shacharis, and I would be up. And then he would see the condensation on his Morris Oxford car window and claim, oh, it's Slichas weather. Only once I saw him tucked away under his bed sheets when he was ill with a fever. I think I was 15. I was mortified. This man never cried. He never emoted. He was ramrod stiff. Not just 2 days ago, he was still active walking between his two stalwart soldiers, Balu and Manju, in the hallway of Trumpeltor. My darling Rochelle, always sending us camera-ready videos documenting his ongoing life. 2 days ago, he surprised us waiting like the gentleman he always was, allowing us to finish the Shloshim ceremony for his Mechutenester in New York on Sunday, and surprising us by leaving this world on the exact yahrzeit of the Shver, his Mechuten, my revered father-in-law. He surprised us because his life was that shofar that kept on blowing. If I may paraphrase Batia, who on his 90th birthday in London midrashically composed a Shabbat Zemir that tickled Dad ever since. Yismach shloimoi b'matnas. Yismach shloimoi b'matnas. B'matnas chelkoi. It captured his core, his simcha, his deep satisfaction with life, his very survival as testament to his victory over Hitler. The love of his life he adored, that exotic beauty from India, his children's accomplishment, the grandchildren and great-grandchildren that visited him and Mum on their perch, on their couch, then him alone. Despite his difficulty with verbal expression, his facial gestures said it all. They never diminished. His sardonic sense of humor manifested itself with raised eyebrows, an impish smile, and if he did not like something, he pulled his nose up, showing us all he was there until the end, looking down upon the world like a true Wiener Schnitzel. Sometimes I would show him Mum's picture, and he looked at me back forlornly, her absence tearing out his heart. Other times, Rochelle would show him a group black and white picture of Mum, Becky, and Eric in Trafalgar Square with all the pigeons, circa 1948. And he would point to Eric, even recently, and say Erich with his thick Viennese German. Rochelle would refer him to that album of his life daily, page by page, pricking his memory like a Megillah. Each chapter, another unique historical fragment that made the mosaic of this man's amazing journey. That book was his Sefer, the Sefer Shel Shlomo. He did not approve of my morbid fascination with the dark side of life and texts. Why delve and kvetch, he would say. He was the survivor, not me. He went through the war, having been saved by an angel 3 times, not me. He always chided me after one of my dark Torahs. Why do you have to read the Pshat this way? Why do you need to resort to midrashic fantasy? Julian, I am a happy man. No complexes like you. No reading into the text anything but pshuto shel dover. In that he was a simple man, and the pashut does not imply simplicity. It was a choice in everything he did. Be straight, ramrod straight, be satisfied with what life gives. Above all, survive. Vayehi kol hashofar holech v'chozek ma'od. Moshe yedaber v'ha'elohim yadenu b'kol. Shlomo yedaber. Shlomo decided everything in his life. Work, play, communal service, retirement, aliyah. V'ha'elokim ya'anenu b'kol. God was his partner. He survived the war. He survived a generation after the war. His life was a testament to his determination and vigor, strength. Born in a distant epidemic 100 years ago. A survivor for a century, surfing on the aphorisms of classical Western wisdom, as if we learned what he felt was necessary through his pithy wisdoms alone. Si tacuissus philosophus mansissus. Pantare, everything flows, the first words of Homer. Those summers in Europe in the Westminster Overdrive, as we crossed on the ferry to France, where I swear I learned in those summer 2 weeks every year from his non-stop commentary on history and geography of this town and this country and life more than I did all year round in the Hasmonean, I can promise you that. And Mum singing on the way back on the ferry to England, oh, the white cliffs of Dover. When we returned, the song he composed in the Austrian Tyrol, in the Semmering, Baruch Hashem Yisborach. He was so full of joy in those summers. The top of the Jungfraujoch, he went outside and the mountain was covered with clouds. And he went outside to his Boidedes. He left us inside because it was cold out there. And then suddenly the whole blue sky opened up and the sun came out and the clouds went away. And he came in and returned and told us in the restaurant there that he had had a religious experience so uncharacteristic of him to indulge in such spiritual excess. Always with humor, always looking on the bright side of life. His humor, however, was continental, not British. He could not fathom my love of Monty Python. His friends were mainly survivors. Uncle Kay, Kutzauer, his partner, Ernest Strauss, Max Landau, Mr. Wolf, the Viennese Gabbai who taught him to be a world-class Gabbai. He had been a Gabbai in the Schiffschule. People would come to him with their problems in shul. That's why he was always late for Mum for Kiddush. Even his co-Gabbai, Rosenthal, as was mentioned, would accompany home for wisdom despite him living in Woodside Park. His sense of right and morality earned him the consistent promotions from Gabbai to vice president, to president of the shul, to national provenance in governing the federation on their board and running the kashrus branch that made the name KF respectable to all. His courage in hiring the first ever Chabad rabbi, who was just a shaliach, to be a British synagogue pulpit rabbi in Rabbi Telsner, for whom his love never faded to this day, because he saw in him the Ehrlichkeit, never mind the trappings of Nusach or even ideology. That didn't bother him. His ability to handle the unruly and offended in shul, and even in the box. In those days, we had boxes where the president, vice president, and the two Gaboim would sit with top hats, listening to the president telling him off-color jokes with his thick Cockney accent during Anim Zemiros, and my father holding back the giggles because he knew Diane Brazina was watching him. His work, life, and his adoring employees, who he had earned their love by secretly paying for their debts. His honesty in business, where his competitors were getting cheaper plastics from Germany, and he resisted doing that. I would come to England on my way back to work in New York from Eretz Yisrael every month. He always picked me up from the Heathrow. He never ever complained and took me back after the weekend, no matter what was on his plate. How can I ever repay that kindness? Only anyone who's been to Heathrow knows how disgusting that place is and how long it takes to get to London from. His adoration and tolerance of Mum, who was not an easy personality, and the two of them on their perch in Trumpeldor, always hand in hand. He admired her violin fingers, worthy of a Michelangelo sculpture. On this perch, where all the world would come to pay homage, surrounded by mostly their artwork on the walls, Dad helping Mum with her bookbinding, the leather, the quality, the color, the thickness, the calligraphy, and whatever new craft she happened to choose. Music saturated the home. Mom, a virtuosi, would listen to YouTubes of various performers critiquing them, and Dad would look on dutifully, for he had his own choice pieces. His favorite melodies he even responded to 2 weeks ago. Eric would play La Campanella, and I would sing it to him, and he would nod. Torselli, Heinrich Heine, Das Lorelei. These songs never left him. Ich weiß nicht, was soll es bedeuten, dass ich so traurig bin. Having borne witness to Hitler's march into Vienna firsthand, Kindertransport, internment in a brutal British of war internment camp, the love of his life, starting a family, communal work, synagogue, warden, president, national prominence, Aliyah, Scrabble with Rivki, calisthenics with Gennady, hot chocolate with a mountain of whipped cream on top of it with Rochelle every day at 5. How to thank those who cared for him. Balu, Manju, Devora, the nurse whose skill and sensitivity to his needs kept him alive. Dr. Simon, whose clinical judgment and balanced understanding of medicine and geriatrics and halakha equals anything we have in America. Dr. Jamal, a British general practitioner who reflects the best of the NHS and whose care and love of her patients in Jerusalem is legendary. My brother, who took care of the finances and weighed Dad, measured his body fluids and his blood indices on a spreadsheet that is worthy of publishing in the British Medical Journal, keeping us all up to date with variations of fluid intake, output, weight, hemoglobin, hematocrit. Need I go on? His Friday visits to Dad with the weekly photo of Dad emerging from the shower in his Harrods white robe, regally looking into the camera, says it all. Debs, who would fly in and swoop down with her medical experience in helping those with cancer in Memorial Sloan Kettering, would wake us up to complacency and usually correctly remind us of this or that medical change. It was easy for Debs and I to come in and then leave on our visits. It was a different story being there for the daily grind. But beyond and beyond and beyond is my darling twin sister, Rochelle. Whose place in Gan Eden is assured, who loved Dad despite his stubbornness, his obstinacy, who pushed him to eat and get nourished, who knew every change in his condition before it happened, who worried incessantly about this or that, who predicted yesterday that something was wrong. It was Rochelle we owe his longevity, insisting on taking him out for his hot chocolate every day, despite whatever was affecting him. Vayhi kol ha-shofar holech v'chozek ma'od. I know not when he began to blow the shofar. In Tatura, in camp, maybe in Vienna, someone taught him. But at 101 last year, we have videos of him blowing to his grandchildren to entertain his guests, despite Mum calling it showing off, even when cognitive articulations failed him. As if his shofar blowing represented his will to breathe, the serpentine shofar bending to his will, as if he finally tamed that inner snake of desire and the outer monster of this century. The power of his sound, the power of his Prussian will, the power of his survival. Memories of his blowing in Finchley's Central Synagogue flooding in the 60s. Those last 5 kolos of the 100, we were on tenterhooks in the ladies' gallery and downstairs as his lips were red as he had to get those last kolos out. We were on tenterhooks carrying the shame of his failure and the pride of his success. What began the century now ends it. The shofar heralding its onset and its end. the jubilee of his life now bookended. How he survived all of this horrific century, doggedly refusing to surrender to the rules of others, his own iron Prussian will of moderation, health, exercise, care of the mind and body, no extremes, mind you. His aliyah as a final arrival to that field of dreams, his delight in walking the streets, unabashed by his yarmulke. I never had to look over my shoulder again, he quipped to me. Impossible in Europe, impossible in England. A microscopic reflection of what has taken place in the miracle of Zionism, but also an inner protection, a survivor's immune response to tragedy through walling off the emotion of loss and the price one pays for that, but also an inner protection. And the demands of discipline and the results from children, and there's no room for failure, no expression of emotion allowed, especially crying. My earliest recollection in my life was in Stamford Hill, N16, 1953 on Yom Kippur. I don't know why he dragged me to shul, and I was obviously a crybaby at that time. And it was during Kedusha because he looked down at me with such a stern look, and I still remember that look to this day. As I watch him blowing, it is as if he is telling me, I may not express myself emotionally. I may not tell you my feelings. I may not divulge my inner thoughts. I never did. But here is my legacy. Listen to the power. Listen to the cadence, the pitch, the perfection. Vayehi kol hashofar. Here is what I leave my children. The memory of this sound, the sound that goes stronger and stronger. Holech v'chozek ma'od. The sound of the Jubilee in this land of Jubilees. The optimism of the survivor. This spiritual immunity I give to you to survive. This deep hole in the heart, the pit in the stomach, the deep sadness. There is some comfort in some texts, and the one that comes up for me is as follows. Do not go gentle into that good night. Old age should burn and rave at the close of day. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. The wise men at their end know dark is night. Because their words had forked no lightning, they do not go gentle into that good night.
עקביה בן מהללאל אומר, הסתכל בשלושה דברים ועינת הבא לידי עבירה. דם יין באת ולאן אתה הולך, ולפני מי אתה עתיד ליתן דין וחשבון, מאין באתם ולאן אתה הולך, למקום עפר, רימה ותולעה, ולפני מי אתה עתיד ליתן דין וחשבון, לפני מלך מלכי המלכים, הקדוש ברוך הוא, והוא רחום, יכפר עוון ולא ישחית, והרבה להשיב אפו, ולא יאיר כל חמתו. קדיש. אמן. Amen. Amen. קהל נכבד, מסע הלוויה יוצא לגוש ת"א, קהל המלווים יעלו פה במדרגות הצמודות לבית ההספד, זה 4-5 דקות הליכה, אנחנו נגיע עם המנוח מסביב, אפשר להדליק בטלפון את הפנסים. ידידים וקרובים מתכבדים בנסיעת המיטה בבקשה.
Thank you, everybody, for coming. We love you all. Thank you for participating. You should all have bracha and simcha in your lives, and may his memory be for a blessing.